It's a pleasure meeting you, man.
Pleasure meeting you too. I know we ran into each other briefly before you left UNC. I'm probably like the first video event that they had over there for when they had the Third City Project thing going on. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were doing some interviews for the cab, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I do remember that. Quite a few good candidates. You're still doing that work with them?
Yeah, actually, I know that they just moved from UNC to Duke now. So yeah, they just signed on for another year. So hopefully we'll see where that takes us.
Dope. Yeah, I'm still in cahoots with them. I'm just not on the team anymore. But
Mhm.
still doing the same work, though they're doing the intersection of health and mass incarceration. Right now, I'm doing work that's looking at ending long-term solitary confinement here in the state of North Carolina. You
It's
know,
awesome.
Yeah, man. It's really about our people. When I say our people, I'm talking about those of us who've been impacted by the criminal legal system, either justifiably or unjustifiably. At the end of the day, from living in one of these places like me, is that these places really traumatize us. And most of the time we emerge from these places, we are in worse condition than when we went in.
Certainly. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. But a big part of what I do with this Prison to Promise podcast is really try to capture stories of people who have found post-incarceration success, for the purpose of trying to um, inspire, inform, and transform the lives of people who are impacted by the criminal legal system, be that the people who've lived directly in there or their family members or people who are at risk of going. So, this is the reason why I've invited you to share your story of hope, inspiration, encouragement, and transformation with our listeners.
Most definitely. It's all about, sort of correcting this false narrative that we see, everywhere when you get the tough on crime warriors and they want to preach this doom and gloom scenario like, incarceration and, militarized law enforcement are the only responses that we have to these issues in our society. And I think oftentimes I agree with you, they do far more harm than they do good. And if we expect people to come out different and correcting them, I don't think that long-term trauma is going to get that net result. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, man. It's a bass backwards approach, man, to healing something or fixing something by re-traumatizing something, But moving forward, perhaps well, I'm gonna ask that you just introduce yourself, man, to our listeners, who you are, where you from, maybe how much time you've done, how long you've been home.
Okay. My name is Joshua Boyer. I served 17 years in federal prison before President Obama commuted my sentence. I've been out roughly 7 years. I kind of caught it at the tail end there, not the last couple batches of clemency, but like right, towards the tail end of his presidency. Was released after serving time in like 6 different institutions across the United States, different federal prisons. It was kind of an odyssey, uh, all the way institutions in Northern Illinois, Southern Illinois, Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, and then Talladega, Alabama. And with getting transported, being a federal prisoner, it's never a beeline in one direction. It's always, over here, sit in confinement for days, weeks to the next spot, and it's just like rinse and repeat. Well, I for the last 6 years, the better part of it, I've been working as a litigation paralegal for a federal law firm here in DC that handles primarily criminal appeals, post conviction, a lot of federal compassionate release, and clemency too. But actually had a great bit of success working with this law firm. Got a couple people clemency during the Trump administration. Quite a few successful compassionate release motions during the pandemic. In addition to that, I've been active in the criminal justice reform space, kind of the policy reform space. Currently working as a senior administrative assistant at Stand Together Trust here in Arlington, Virginia.
Right on. It sounds like you've come full circle almost. You've done a gang of time. You've been around the country on a federal prison tour, so to speak.
Yeah.
And now you've been out for a while. How long have you been out?
Approximately 6 years.
Approximately six
6
years.
years in August.
Awesome. That's dope, man. And you've been doing a lot of good work. It looks like working in the legal space, the advocacy space. So congratulations to you. We need more people like you coming out and doing this work, man, because nobody's going to free us but us,
Yeah.
you know. And
And
go ahead.
the crazy thing is too, and it's so refreshing to see so many people that are kind of like getting behind this movement, whether it's nonprofits, people in the academic space. But exactly what you said, have to quote one of my friends and colleagues here, Glenn Martin. He always says those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but most times furthest from the power and resources necessary to affect change. It'd be kind of like, liken this to the civil rights era. If people expected somebody else to get out and march for them, it was never going to happen. So unless, you and I and the rest of the people that have sort of experienced this and lived it, unless we sort of, figure out a way to get active, to consolidate power amongst ourselves and get a voice, we're not going to be able to sort of affect the long lasting structural change that really needs to take place.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, for me, I jumped into the space that we're working in, that we're talking about, because I saw the difficulties that were there for me. And I had to really work hard to get through these difficulties, these challenges, these post-incarceration challenges. I got out in 97 and I figured, well, damn, it's hard. I was fortunate enough to have some agency and to have some family and to have a little bit of academics and planning. But I figured, from my experience, I wanted to share that with other people coming behind me to try to help make their experience a little easier. And yeah, again, nobody's going to make that experience easier for the people coming out of prison. As nobody can do it better, should I say, or have more interest than those of us who have been incarcerated and who are coming out and who are
definitely
doing this. We know the loops, we know the impediments or the challenges, and we know what to tell people to look out for and how to maybe circumvent or circumnavigate those challenges.
Yeah, and to be honest, I've had a lot of advantages. I've had a lot of support since I've been out. I wouldn't be where I am at today, even with the opportunities that I've had, without, people showing me that, a little bit of grace. And not everybody has that. Most people don't coming out. Most people, have fractured families, don't have any sort of resources, don't for whatever reason, they've been gone so long that whatever association, whatever collective agency that they had leaving is gone.
Yeah.
So, and I know how difficult it was for me having these advantages and just, having people there, the safety net.
Yeah.
And I needed it. There was times where I had it and I still, that mentality, okay, well, look, if I fail, I can handle it. Well, that's kind of like we kind of grow accustomed to, to dealing with that. And that kind of becomes the mindset rather than, taking a deep breath, trying to collect your thoughts and figure out a way in spite of the obstacles to continue moving forward. So I honestly, I really empathize at a really, high level with people that are struggling with coming out of, prison and dealing with reentry, because the resources, the safety net just isn't there. And it's, I guess society would sort of attribute these things to, okay, well, look, this person was just inherently bad, but really, I think if you took anybody, even aside from the trauma, made them into like a second class citizen that didn't have any connection to, to the resources that normal citizens have and enjoy.
Third class for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I would be really interested to see if they fared any better than, the rest of us who do have lived experience would in under those conditions. So I think that just sort of redirecting this narrative and kind of, having these conversations is just really key.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And thanks for that. And I think like many of these people that you just mentioned who haven't had the lived experience would not do nearly as well, or would not fare well at all. But one of the things I also think about just as I'm listening to you, is when it comes to having supports, what would you suggest for people who may not have the safety nets like people like you and me and others have, though we know it's few of us who have them, those who don't have them, what can they do, when they're getting out or preparing to get out to begin developing this safety net, this support net?
That's tough. That's tough because I mean, I guess it kind of depends on, the specifics. I guess certain areas have a lot more resources in term or not say have resources, but have allocated those resources for that purpose. Whereas I came out, I was in Florida, and Florida is one of those states, unfortunately. I mean, there's a lot of great people down there, and I'm not trying to say everybody in government down there is bad, but when it comes to the criminal justice system, when it comes to incarceration, Florida's motto is like, look, if you're looking for some sort of mercy, you probably better try the church. Don't, come asking for us. You made a mistake.
Right.
You made your bed, now lay in it. So I would just say, I would say that the preparation actually has to take place right long before you're ready to get out. I would say that use the time wisely. I think that people that succeed might not necessarily succeed because of that infrastructure in the prison system, education stuff. I think a lot of people become successful in spite of what they've had to deal with, not because of the resources that are available, but that's just sort of ignites the spark and that fire to make them push even harder. It's going to be hard. It's going to be incredibly hard because luck of the draw dealing with the folks that you have supervising you. I was incredibly lucky. I had, compared to the horror stories, I had, they might as well be inducted into sainthood, in terms of like probation officers, because all the stuff and the stereotypes and stuff that I heard, coming down and dealing with federal supervision, I didn't have those problems. I had two officers that were really supportive, and not everybody has that. So I would just say start preparing long before, use that dead time or whatever. Don't sit in front of a TV. Don't, spend it in the gym sitting there just telling more stories about what was happening on the street. But use that time to sort of like to empower yourself, to build yourself back up, to teach yourself something, find something you're interested in, and just go full bore with it.
I think that's great insight, and I think that's great advice, man. And it's very consistent with messages that I've heard from other people that I've interviewed on this platform, as well as with my own experience. Yeah, how do we sharpen ourselves? How do we make ourselves, in the words of the great American poet, the rapper Nasir Jones, Nas, he made a song called Stay Chiseled or Chiseled. And what he was talking about was not so much chiseling your body to be fit and muscular, but to have your mindset chiseled and defined and directed so that you have, should I say, empowered yourself to take control of your life, no matter what it is.
Definitely.
So that's like increasing your knowledge base.
Words of wisdom.
Yeah, man. And becoming educated. And when I think about education, listening to you, I'm thinking about the origin of the word, which means to bring forth that which is within, to sharpen my own natural proclivities, but also to become, I think, degreed or diplomaed or licensed or whatever it takes. I think all that helps.
We got Pell reform now. I mean, to be honest with you, I think that's amazing. And just if you would have told me that that was possible, if I was sitting there during those 17 years, I would have. So many people that I know that did have to do like the correspondence course, they had to fight for that, and actually have resources outside to be able to do it. But now, now that those resources are available and people have those opportunities, I would definitely say go to school, use those resources to go to school, become whoever you want to be, because you do, if you can survive prison, you can survive anything.
That's so true, man, because being in prison is the bottom of the bucket, and there's only one way up, and that's the only way up. And I think also when we speak about school, research has continuously shown over the decades that people that show proficiency in academic and vocational trades tend to have lower recidivism rates and greater success post incarceration. So yeah, I think you dropped words of wisdom there.
Yeah, with the collateral consequences that people experience coming out, that sort of bar them from employment. And if you don't have that degree, you really are going to be stuck in an entry-level job that isn't going to give you any sort of upward mobility, and you're not gonna find that level of contentment in life that's going to make you want to go to straight and narrow and kind of leave the stuff, the negative stuff that really led you down the wrong path and led a lot of us to a prison cell anyways behind. So definitely.
Absolutely. It's about broadening, I think, our options, man, and going to school. If for nothing else, if you don't learn anything from going to school, once you get a degree, a certification, a license, or whatever, I think what that says is that this person is willing to work hard. They're willing to go in the opposite direction of that which led them to prison. And so that speaks not only to the person who's earned the credential, but also to the person who may be scrutinizing me or you and saying, okay, you've been to prison. And like in my own personal case, people would oftentimes say that when I was going for jobs or whatever, or getting in school or whatever. And I'd say, yeah, but look, I have an associate's degree. Yeah, but look, I have a bachelor's. Yeah, but look, I got a master's. And people who've been to prison haven't done this, and people who've been in the community haven't done this. Come on, man. I ain't the same dude.
Yeah, and what people in prison don't realize, I mean, tons of disadvantages, but a lot of people in the community, the reason that they don't get the opportunity to sort of follow that path and get a degree is, they've got kids, they've got bills, they've got all these things that, sort of, I don't want to call them impediments, but it's just life happens so fast that a lot of people just don't have that fortitude, don't have that extra time and space to get that degree. But people in prison, what else do you got to do?
I'm trying to tell you, man.
Get the grant,
yeah,
get the degree, come out, and rise, man, rise.
Stay off the spades table, the dominoes table.
Yeah.
It's okay to watch those things and play those games, but most of our effort should be in, elevating our minds. Bob Marley, he quoted Marcus Garvey years ago. He quoted him in one of his songs, the Redemption Song. And he said, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And it's the things that lead us to prison for the most part, which is reflective of mental slavery, because it's negative, as you talked about, and we want to stay away from that. And as we're talking about this, can you maybe shine a little light on what caused you to maybe bend a corner, flip a coin, or start, pursuing something different than what it was that led you to prison?
Me, I would say most definitely the catalyst, that sort of the spark that kind of led me in a different direction, was the fact of my conviction itself. As a background, my conviction resulted from a stash house sting that was conducted by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Years after I, started this prison odyssey, number of courts ruled them unconstitutional. The inspector general found a bunch of problems with them. The ATF hasn't conducted any since, I believe, 2017 or 2016 because of these problems.
Mhm.
One of the main problems was that 91% of the people that they targeted with these things were African American or Latino. Purely, discriminatory policing on behalf of the ATF, in addition to, a whole bunch of other host of other issues that were associated with it. What Just to kind of like break the story down into something really quick. They would have an informant that would, go around to different places and say, well, hey, look, I know where there's a house that has 50 kilos of cocaine and $500,000. I can give you the location. I just want a quarter of the proceeds. By virtue of having that conversation, you just are guilty of committing a conspiracy to possess with the intent to distribute drugs that never existed.
Mhm.
50 kilos that, if you imagine what sort of sentence that would result from somebody getting caught with 50 kilos of cocaine, it's the same as if it was actually tangible cocaine, even though it was just a figment of a conversation that an ATF agent set this informant out to have. So I ended up getting a 24-year sentence after going to trial for having a conversation about the possibility of going in and robbing an imaginary house full of imaginary cocaine. So and granted, I mean, I want to be completely and totally candid. I, regret showing up. I regret participating in those conversations, however significant that participation was or wasn't, is neither here nor there. It was a mistake. But for the ATF and but for the situation that they created, I would have never been there.
Yeah, it sounds very unjust. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was just reading an article on these stings and how they really just set people up. And it really wasn't anyone committing a crime. It was people maybe talking about a crime, but no one really ever committed a crime.
Yeah. And just, along the way, I ran into a bunch of, as I got older, the years that I did in prison, I ran across a bunch of other young kids that were, 21, 22, 23, some of them a little bit older, fell for the same mistake. And, it just got in there, didn't really understand what the lawyers were talking about when I was going to trial and how I could even be convicted of this, because it just seemed so bizarre. So I figured that since I wasn't getting the answers that I wanted to, or the answers didn't make sense to me, the only thing that I could do was, because I had a whole bunch of extra time, was learn everything that I possibly could about the law, dealing with my criminal conviction, dealing with, the conditions of my confinement. So that's what I did. I sat in a law library all those 16 years for probably 5 days a week to 6, 8, sometimes 10 hours a day. Even before we had computers, I'd just sit there with stacks of federal reporters and Supreme Court reports and just sit there and try to figure this out, just unlock this puzzle, because the law is like a different language.
It sure is, man. It's Greek, it's French, it's Latin, it's all these languages we have no idea how to interpret. But it sounds like you had a hell of an educational experience, and it sounds like you were self-educated, And so I guess just spending that time focusing on your case is what helped you to change direction, change course in your life.
Yeah, well, and like pursuing my own case, other people that, were usually outside playing basketball or sitting at the dominoes table or whatever, maybe just didn't have that same desire to learn the law. They see you in there every day. They see you working on it. So it's like, then all of a sudden I started working on everybody's cases, started getting a couple wins, here and there. And then all of a sudden, you become like that guy on the compound to talk to, because, everybody wants to, just the idea, even though the odds are stacked against us, I mean, everybody has that desire to go home, so it's like,
well, at least to get out of prison, because some folk ain't got home to go to, but they get out of prison,
to get out.
Just try to make a better life. Because as you and I know, a bad day in the streets beats a good day in prison any day.
Definitely.
So it's awesome that you were able to change the course of your trajectory, your life's trajectory. Clearly you're an older person now. You got a couple gray hairs in your face.
Yeah. They say it's wisdom, but I don't know. I don't know if I agree with it yet.
Right. Because we see a lot of fools with gray hair too.
Yeah.
But what definitely does happen as we mature is that we tend to age out of crime. We tend to age out of making foolish, emotion-based decisions and so on and so forth. And so because you're an adult now with some gray hair, probably got a couple aches and pains that you usually didn't have. I'm thinking you're
Definitely.
glad to be here. I think it's just a sign we're still here, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're making better decisions now for yourself. And one of the things you also talked about, and I want to tie it in with this earlier, is you talked about, when people are in prison, the importance of creating a plan. You didn't say specifically that, but you were talking about creating a plan, working on getting yourself in a better position to make better decisions post incarceration, even while you're incarcerated for that matter. But what I guess I'd like to ask you to speak to is what would you suggest for a young person, or let's just say not even a young person, let's just say a young Joshua. What would you have suggested for a young Joshua who was in your situation, or say Joshua is now coming, up and he's flirting with getting in trouble? What would you share with your younger self?
It's hard because I deal with it with my own kids now, just to try to get them to slow down and think. But I'll tell you what, if the young me were able to actually like listen and kind of like absorb some of the wisdom and stuff that we're sitting here talking about right now, I would just say that the long-term consequences, figure out a way to wrap your mind around the long-term consequences. Try to figure out what you're doing, what the consequences are, rather than accepting these platitudes and stuff, these ideas or notions that you got on TV or from somewhere else. But the consequences are harsh in the criminal justice system, very harsh. I didn't fully appreciate what I was getting myself into when I sort of like made the decision that kind of led me down this path. So I would say that instead of being wrapped up in just living one day to the next, try to set some like short and long-term goals for yourself that don't involve, just hanging out, partying, having fun. Those things can come too. And I think that when you're young, especially when I was young, I didn't really appreciate that. Hey, look, you can still have fun. You can still, be yourself. You don't have to lose any element of yourself. But life also comes with responsibility. And unless you learn this early, they've got a place for you. And that place, regardless of how they might glamorize it on TV or the stories that you've heard from people that want to try to portray themselves as being hard or whatever,
place is hell.
It is. It's really hell. And once you walk down that path, as you and I both know, I'm still dealing with the consequences today, even after like 6 years. Every time I go to get a job, every time I apply, for credit, every time I try to move to a new house, I think that these are just the things that, a lot of times aren't talked about as frequently. So young people in that situation who, tend to have a little bit of tunnel vision and really don't see a whole lot on the periphery anyways. I was one of them.
Me too.
I don't think that, I think that as older folks, as people who have had these experiences, as society, as a general whole, I think that we need to do more about educating young people, about what the consequences are and about what the potential pitfalls are, before they get themselves into that situation in the first place.
Yeah. And so I think we need like more discussions like this, maybe not just on video, but maybe even having panels in high schools and middle schools, where we can have these type of discussions where children can hear this discussion and understand some of the consequences.
Mhm.
And one of the things that comes to my mind as you were talking was I'm thinking, placing a chessboard in front of the young person, and explaining to them the properties of chess and how it isn't just that one square, but it's multiple squares that you're thinking about while you're standing in that one place, thinking about those long-term consequences.
It isn't the first move, the second move, the third, the fourth. It might be the 25th move,
Yeah,
but yeah, having that foresight and really being able to, think about, not just one moment to the next, one day to the next, but, the path forward.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's some insight and some wisdom, I think, to pass on to younger people, you know. Yeah, that was just very heavy. And again, it's consistent with a lot of the conversations that I've been having as well. So if anyone has listened to any of our Prison to Promise podcast episodes, they'll see the consistency of messaging from men and women from different parts of the country who have shared their stories here on this platform, you know. And so, as we're coming up towards the end of our time together, good brother, um, I'd like to know if there is, or if you have any way, or what is the way? I shouldn't say I'd like to know. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of all over the place. But um, how can people reach out to you if they wanted to reach out to you for whatever reason, to hear your story, to have you speak, maybe to have you do some legal work, whatever it may be, if people wanted to reach out to you?
Well, I'm pretty much all over social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I guess the younger folks, I mean, that's really the only thing that they're on. So I mean, I guess we got to kind of be somewhat savvy and
Yeah.
meet people where they're at.
I'm
So
still trying to figure out Instagram and Twitter.
yeah, yeah. Well, Twitter, I think I got it pretty much figured out, but the whole Instagram thing, like, I guess there's do's and don'ts. I just use it for what I use it for, and
Yeah,
but young people, they got like a whole code when it comes to stuff on Instagram. So
absolutely. So find you on Instagram at or Twitter or
yep,
at,
Josh Boyer, Instagram,
okay, Josh Boyer. That's JOSH
UA, yeah, BOYER.
BOYER on Instagram and Twitter. Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, dope, 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 dope. That's nice to have, because you never know who's gonna listen and who might want to be able to highlight your story to reach some people. You know.
Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing I want to ask you that I failed to ask you, and that is, how did you see your life post incarceration? What did you envision for yourself um, before you got out? And how important is having a vision before you even get there?
I always knew that if or when I got out, that really I was going to try to like go full force, and go straight forward at trying to do what I can to change the criminal justice system, in terms of, at least at the federal level, which is like where most of my focus has been, just because of having the depth of lived experience that I did,
Yeah,
and just spending almost 2 decades
yeah.
just familiarizing myself with the ins, the outs, the history,
Mhm.
the politics of reform and criminal justice. So really, I didn't know quite at the time, because this is like a 23-year-old me going into the prison system. Other than what I kind of saw on the outside, the
Yeah,
glimpses that I had, I didn't know exactly what form that was going to take or how I was going to go about it. I just knew that I had the drive, the determination. I knew that this was what I was going to do. I kind of like almost finding your mission and finding your purpose.
mhm.
I knew that my mission was to do this, to go out and sort of like tell this story. I
Yeah,
didn't really know what form it was going to take, but I was determined, to try to branch out and to, try to use whatever resources that I had at my disposal when that time came.
Yeah.
And I would definitely suggest that other people, try to figure out if you've got resources on the outside that you can have. I mean, I know through like Core Links and JPay, you can have information sent in there. It might be kind of a slow system in terms of getting information and kind of keeping abreast of the stuff that's going on out there, whatever your passion is.
Yeah.
But definitely, try to structure your time around using it, to the utmost of your ability to learn whatever it is that you're passionate about, and try to figure out, how to apply that knowledge to something that's going to be lucrative for you and like keep you on the straight and narrow when you get out.
Yeah. And then we have it, man. I think this is just another story of how we can be successful post-incarceration. Clearly, it's going to be harder than probably the traditional route that people take who haven't been incarcerated, but it can happen, And I know, and I'm sure you can attest to this, resistance builds strength, it builds resilience, it builds wisdom, it builds insights. It can also crush us, but I think it's important, as you talked about, probably having some resources around you, having some people who can support you, and what I think about is like, I used to lift weights often, and sometimes I'd get under the weights that were just a little too heavy for me. And if I lifted them by myself, I might get hurt.
Yeah.
Because it was just too much resistance, too much pressure. But I was always mindful to get a spotter, somebody that I could trust, somebody that I knew that wouldn't let the weight crush me and would help me move the weight. And so just like people coming out of prison, we need spotters. We need people that's going to help bring us into closer proximity with success.
Most definitely.
No.
Most definitely. I mean, find you a mentor, find you somebody that runs even keel and has a good head on their shoulders, because, just the mentality of coming out, I don't care who you are, you're either going to be so frightened by the trauma that you're not going to want to cross the street without making sure that the walk signal's going, or you're going to still have that chip on your shoulder, like, hey, look, I gotta fight for my survival. And, but that's not the mentality to carry out, in this society. And that's what's going to get a lot of us back in trouble. So most definitely have that spotter.
Right on, man. And yo, man, as we close up, one of the things I want to say to you that I noticed as soon as we got on, and I didn't say anything to you then, I'm gonna say it now, is you seem to have this perpetual grin on your face, like there's this underlying joy there. At least that's what I'm picking up, despite the trauma of being incarcerated.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It's crazy that you say that, but yeah, I'm definitely happy. Happy for the second chance, because unfortunately, a lot of the people that were equally deserving of a second chance didn't get clemency. They haven't got compassionate release or got a break. So, got to sort of like live every day to the fullest out here, and whenever can have an opportunity to give back, which I've been fortunate enough to be in that situation, like we're sitting here today having this conversation. It's a beautiful thing.
Dope, man. And so with that, man, I'm gonna call it a wrap. And my hope is that this conversation will reach lots of people and enlighten someone.
Most definitely. Glad to be here with you today.
Thank you for your time, good brother.